the recent report by the disciplinary panel in the Andrew Thomas case knows that they found there was clear and convincing evidence that Joe Arpaio had engaged in a criminal conspiracy with Andrew Thomas to deprive other people of their rights. And we have 4 people, again, who can give first-person testimony about those abuses. We want to thank them for their participation, Mr. Gascón, who flew in from San Francisco, and the others. At this point, I want to turn the time over to our moderator, Julie Erfley, who is the creator of a blog, Politics Uncut. By the way, me and her and Tom Lovejoy did not color coordinate before this event. That was just total serendipity. But I would like to turn the time over to Julie. I want to invite everybody to stick around to the end. Our co-founder, Randy Patterson, president, is going to give some comments at the very end. He also has a couple very exciting announcements to make, so make sure you stick around to the very end for that. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, and welcome to Citizens for Better Arizona's second forum on Sheriff Arpaio's abuse of power. In our first forum, our panelists focused on the Department of Justice's investigation and the subsequent report, the legal ramifications of the Sheriff's Department's disregard for the residents' constitutional rights. Tonight, we focus on how Arpaio's abusive practices and policies have affected local police departments, cities, and victims. 2 of our panelists will share their personal stories of civil rights violations, from being stopped by sheriff's deputies to being charged without evidence. While our other 2 panelists will speak about the impact on local communities and the issue of trust between residents and police. Following this discussion, we will have a very special presentation, as Chad said, which will limit our ability to take Q&A. However, we encourage you to stick around after that time to speak with some of our panelists. Before we begin, however, we would like to recognize a couple of very special guests in our audience. They happen to be running for Maricopa County Sheriff. They are John Rowan and Paul Penzone. Would you please stand? Thank you for coming tonight. And without further ado, we'd like to start with George Gascón. In November of 2011, George Gascón was elected district attorney for the city and county of San Francisco, the first Latino to ever hold that office. Born in Havana, Cuba, Gascón's parents were initial supporters of the Cuban Revolution until his family became the target of harassment by the Castro government. At the age of 13, Gascón's family immigrated to the United States and settled in South Central Los Angeles. As a monolingual Spanish speaker in a new country, Gascón struggled in school and eventually dropped out. He went on, however, to not only earn his high school diploma, but a Bachelor of Arts in History from California State University, Long Beach, and a Juris Doctor degree from Western State University College of Law. District Attorney Gascón has over 3 decades of experience in law enforcement. Gascón worked his way up to the ranks of the Los Angeles Police Department from officer to assistant chief. He earned a positive reputation for reforming one of the nation's largest police departments by revamping officer training, teaching proper police procedure, and improving the comp staff program. Gascón became the chief of police in Mesa, Arizona in July 2006. He faced an anti-immigrant climate ready to blame Arizona's crime problems on undocumented immigrants. Gascón challenged Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio and anti-immigrant groups by proving that immigrants weren't to blame for the Mesa's crimes problems. By the end of his 3-year tenure, serious crime in Mesa dropped by 30%, and the Latino community and others had a strong working relationship with the police department. In 2009, Gascón was hired as chief of police for San Francisco, where he focused on reform, crime reduction, and modernizing the department. He introduced CompStat, created the city's first Brady policy, and enhanced internal affairs. During his tenure, murders were the lowest they have been in over half a century. As district attorney, Gascón is taking a creative approach to public safety. He believes current models that rely heavily on incarceration have not worked and are destroying communities of color. He is pioneering a new path in law enforcement prosecution that focuses on reducing recidivism. A In May 2011, District Attorney Gascón launched the Neighborhood Courts Program. The program diverts non-serious cases away from overcrowded courtrooms and into the community where residents decide proper punishment. It has also launched innovative programs to reduce truancy. District Attorney Gascón is a graduate of the FBI's National Executive Institute and is a member of the Harvard University Kennedy School of Government's executive session on policing and public safety. Please give a warm welcome to District Attorney George Gascón.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone. It's really an honor for me to be here today with you. People ask, why did you come back to Arizona? Why not? And there are multiple reasons. One is that I still have a tremendous emotional attachment to Arizona. I believe that Arizona is one of those great places. People work hard, they try to do the right things day in and day out. And my 3 years of experience here were incredible in many ways. It was a time for me to grow professionally, a time for me to grow as an individual. I had the opportunity to see goodness as I have in just about every community that I've been in, but I also had the opportunity to see evil. And that made my experience here incredibly touching and incredibly moving for the rest of my life. And that is one of the reasons why I'm here. But another reason that I am here is because I believe that also the impact that the practices of the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, not only in Maricopa and the people of this beautiful county, but across the nation, can no longer be tolerated. It was really interesting. When I was here and I was going through a lot of the things that we went through and dealing with Sheriff Arpaio, I would often call friends, or I would sometimes travel for business or pleasure, and I would talk to people about the things that were going on here. And often, people would look at me and say, you know, I think you're a cyberman. Well, if they didn't say that, perhaps out of respect, I could tell in the way that they were looking at me. And I can say, can you hear me back? Can you hear me in the back okay?
Yes.
No? Is this any better?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm sorry. People would look at me when I was talking about the things that were going on here, and it was very clear that even if they would not tell me, I could tell in their expressions that they thought that I was somehow exaggerating, that this could not occur in America today. But of course, all of us here know that this not only has occurred in America today, but it continues to occur. And that what is going on here is incredibly damaging to the well-being of this community and communities around the world. Around the country. I can tell you that many of those people that I talked with in the years ago, I talked about the problems, and now I carry with me often the findings of the U.S. Justice Department that talk about the abuses here. And I say, okay, now it's not George Gascón talking. Here is the Justice Department talking about the things. People become enraged. They can't believe that this is actually happening. And I believe that there is an importance to that today. I think that often timing is very, very important. I think that when I first talked to people in the Justice Department in 2008 about some of the problems that were going on here, there was a tremendous amount of doubt as to whether in fact things were as bad as they were. But now we have, after years and hundreds of hours of an investigation by the U.S. Justice Department, we know that in fact the abuses that many of us have been talking about for a long time, in fact, have occurred and continue to occur today. I have to tell you now that also when you look at the Bar Association, coming with the findings that they have, as they look at the practices of the Maricopa County Attorney, Andrew Thomas, and Sheriff Arpaio, and they come with the findings that they have, that the abuse of power reached the levels of criminal conspiracy. Those are very powerful statements coming from an organization that is not emotionally involved in what is going on here. These are professionals looking at the evidence, looking at what has been going on here, and comparing the behavior with the law and saying we have sufficient evidence to establish that criminal behavior, criminal conspiracy has taken place in this county. And what is horrible about it is that it involved members of law enforcement, involved our county attorney, the person entrusted with enforcing the law, and our sheriff, the person entrusted with actually going out and delivering those services in our community. I can tell you that when I first came to Arizona in 2006, I knew very quickly that things under the leadership of Sheriff Arpaio were very, very different. And there was something that was really wrong. Because I immediately started to be the object of Arpaio's criticism in the media, even though we hadn't yet started to have any encounters. It wasn't long after that as I was traveling through my town as well as some of the other neighboring communities, I would often hear people talking about how undocumented immigrants or illegal immigrants, however you want to call them, were the reason for the crime waves that were going on in our communities. And I knew instantly, based on my experience for many years, that that could not be the case. But I went one step further, and I started to actually analyze our crime statistics in Mesa, as well as looking at crimes in the state, looking at our prison population, doing comparisons, doing demographic comparisons between people that have been arrested and convicted of crimes against the total population. And I was pretty quickly able to convince myself and others that not only Mesa's crime problem is not centered around those that were here without documents, but dealing with the state. What we're seeing is two demagogues that are utilizing a very emotional subject in order to further their own political ambition. Unfortunately, I have to say that Sheriff Arpaio is a master at manipulating the media. He knows how to do those 15, those 30-second sound bites that have a tremendous amount of attraction when we are tired of problems and when we want simple solutions to very complicated problems. As I continued to challenge Sheriff Arpaio, and I did so openly, where I wrote opinion pieces that were published in the Arizona Republic, later on they were published in the New York Times, the pressure continued to increase, and he started to increase the number of raids, the quote-unquote crime sweeps, or whatever he called it, where he would come into the city of Mesa and target primarily people that appear to be Hispanics. And I said appear to be Hispanics because I often found that actually there were also Native Americans that were unfortunately being picked up and they were being checked for their immigration status, and a couple of them actually got arrested, which I thought was somewhat ironic, given that if anyone really has the right to be here, the impact of this behavior had so many ripple effects. I can tell you, for instance, I had an incident one time where I had one of our Latin American consul officers that came to me because they had a female, a citizen of that country, that had been brutally raped, and she had been beaten. She needed medical help, and this woman was terrified and unwilling to seek medical services, much less report this to the police. I have to tell you that this person did not reside in Mesa, they resided in one of the neighboring communities. But when you have that level of fear in the community, when you have women that have been raped, have been beaten, but she is afraid that perhaps even seeking medical services could be enough that it gave herself not only the deportation, but that other members of her family, and that for that reason she's not going to seek the service as a doctor, and she certainly is not going to report crime. There is something fundamentally wrong in a community that is allowed to take place. But that is a kind of, those are the type of incidents that happened in Maricopa County in 2007, in 2008. I would suspect that they still happen today. I can tell you that when the crime sweeps, or those sweeps that we did going after immigration started to take place in Mesa, often parents would come to me and would be fearful they would not send their kids to school when there were rumors that the Maricopa County Sheriff was coming to our county. And I know some of you from Mesa are agreeing because that was the case. We would have, school attendance would drop significantly when there was a rumor that the Maricopa County Sheriff may be coming in the neighborhood. And then, of course, as the pressure and our continuous arguments and disagreements, they were very, very public. Then this culminated in one day where I got a call, and I would never forget this. This was in October of 2008. I get a call from my dispatch center in Mesa, and it was approximately midnight, and I said, there's a large number of what appears to be law enforcement officers dressed in SWAT-type uniforms, and they are police canine, and they're assembling at one of our local parks. We don't know who they are. We're really unsure. They're certainly not ours. But we're concerned. We haven't received a call from anyone telling us that there's any neighboring law enforcement agency that is going to be operating in Mesa this evening. And I have to tell you that creates a very unsafe situation for law enforcement. In fact, the fear of having what is commonly called in the business the blue on blue shooting is very real. And we have been going through a period where we actually had some gang members here in Phoenix that had been dressing in police-like uniforms and had conducted home invasion, and there was a shooting on homicide involving some gangs that were fighting over narcotics. And the people that came to the hit were dressed or appeared to be dressed like police officers. So there was a tremendous amount of anxiety, and I had requested the Maricopa County Sheriff that if they were going to come in 2 hours a day, that they would at least give us 48-hour notice so that we had enough time to notify our community and make sure that we understood that they were coming in. So here all of a sudden, it's about midnight, I'm getting a call that we have, and it was somewhere around 60 or 80 uniformed law enforcement officers in one of our local parks, and we really couldn't understand what was going on. So I asked one of our lieutenants to go and meet this individuals and trying to figure it out. And then I get a call later and said, well, they are Maricopa County deputies. They won't tell us what they're doing here. So I said, okay, just stand back, don't get in their way. Let's wait and see what happens. And then a few minutes later, there's a call to our communications, to our 911 center, to report that the Sheriff's Department is going to be serving search warrants and arrests, and there's going to be a focus on arrest in a couple of city facilities. Still, information is very, very sketchy. So again, my office and my colleagues said, what should we do? So I said, just stay back and make sure that you just let them do whatever they're going to do. And then, of course, looking back retrospectively, because I had the benefit later in the morning to actually view the video of the raids that took place in our city administration building and our main city library, where there were approximately 60 officers dressed in tactical gear rushing into the two buildings. And then you can see, several minutes later in the public library, you can see there are 2 or 3 women that are being taken out, and you can see that they're very fearful, and they're being basically just sort of walked out in a very, very rushed-type fashion. And then I get the opportunity to see the other video from the city administration building, where the janitorial staff is also being lined up in the lobby. And in the case of that particular facility, everyone has some sort of proof that they were authorized to be here. The janitorial staff from the library, apparently there were 2 women actually that didn't, so they were arrested. And then later on in the morning, approximately 6 in the morning or 7, then the police facility gets rated, and there they our human resources database to make sure that anybody who been working, we protect the database of all the city employees that were getting access to city facilities, and that's what took the hard drive. And they were seeking to find out if there were documented workers that had been given the authority to work by the Mesa Police Department in the city. And to me, that was probably the pinnacle of just how outrageous the conduct that was going on. And that, frankly, I exploded. And later on, I provided testimony in Congress concerning what was going on here. But I can tell you that we can go on for hours, and I know that other panelists here have also incredible stories that I want to take their time. But this type of behavior has to stop. And this is not the behavior that only impacts one community, this impacts all of our communities. So we have people in our nation violating the Constitution with impunity and continuing to do so. It is unacceptable to all of us. It is un-American. It is not the American way, and we need to come together to make sure that it stops. Thank you.
I wanted to ask you, in our last panel discussion, we heard a lot about this breakdown in the checks and balances between the sheriff's department, the county sheriff, and the county attorney's office. Now, you served as both district attorney and chief of police. What do you view as the proper role between those two departments?
It's really, please let me know. My family located. No. The role between the police and the prosecutor are roles that are very connected in one way, because in order to be effective in dealing with criminals and crime calls in the community, there has to be a great deal of cooperation between the two. But there is also another piece of being the prosecutor. As the county attorney or the district attorney, that person has the responsibility for ensuring that law enforcement in that county is operating within the law, that it's operating constitutionally. So there's a checks and balances process, and it is the district attorney or the county attorney that has that responsibility. When you have a situation like we did with Andrew Thomas conspiring with the sheriff Arpaio in order to violate people's rights, you basically have a complete breakdown of our legal and judicial system.
Next, I'd like to introduce Rebecca Jimenez. Rebecca has always been a firm believer in volunteerism, spending thousands of hours helping her children's schools and extracurricular activities. That sense of giving back to her community has carried over to the town she has called home for almost 4 decades. Rebecca Jimenez served on the Guadalupe Town Council from December 2007 to May 2011 and was mayor from December of 2007 to September of 2008. As mayor, Rebecca made headlines when she had a showdown with the sheriff when he went to the town of Guadalupe uninvited on April 3rd, 2008 to conduct one of his infamous immigration sweeps. For the first time, Sheriff Joe had to retreat and move his command post out of the community he was serving. When this occurred, he was invited to set up his post in Mesa by the now recalled former state senator Russell Pierce. That these series of events would serve to motivate other leaders and ordinary citizens to do the right thing and stand up to this type of modern-day racial scare tactics. Rebecca has been featured in the Phoenix New Times, the LA Times, the New Yorker, Lovejoy, and the Arizona Republic. She also received South Mountain Community College's 2005-2006 Humanitarian Award, Stylos' 2008 Biggest Arizona Moment, Phoenix New Times 2008 Best David and Goliath Moment, and was CPLC and Univision Radio's 40 Under 40 Leader in 2011. Rebecca is a busy mom caring for her 5 children, the youngest just 1 year old. Please help me welcome Rebecca Jimenez.
Okay, where do I begin? I guess, as Julie was saying, that I got on council because there were so many complaints about a new development happening. And so when you want to do something, you want to make change, you got to be part of that change. You can't just sit back and complain and hope things are just going to change just miraculously without you doing anything. So I decided to get on council. There was a couple that resigned, so I got appointed in December 2007, and amongst the council members became mayor right away. I've heard of, I used to watch these immigration sweeps that we would do on the news and just be like, in awe of just everything happening, and usually you would hear about it for 2 or 3 days, whatever community he was targeting. Then he came to Guadalupe on that fateful day of April 3rd, 2008. That morning, I started getting phone calls from all the media, what's going on, what's your take on this, give us some feedback. I had no idea, so I started making phone calls. And they're just like, oh, we're just doing one of our crime sweeps. There's a lot of gang activity there. Remember, our town is less than 1 square mile, about 6,000 people. Yeah. And we're situated between like South Tempe and the Point South Mountain, which is a golf course. So I was just a little thrown off. I've seen them come before where instead of our 2 deputies that we normally have, maybe we have 6 or 8 deputies when there's big festivities happening or parties, things like that. So here we go, all the media is rolling in, and then the next thing you know, it looks like our town is literally under siege. Hundreds of deputies, posse members, everything from horseback riding to unmarked cars, with like Sinaloa, Mexico license plates with deputies riding in them. I mean, just everywhere you turn, I mean, they were down every street, like they were on a hunt. You really felt like you were in a different country, that this could not be happening in your hometown. So, I mean, I think everybody from that town, that I thought, let's just back up a little bit. The most given out ticket that night was improper use of porn. So I went to our judge that sits there in the town of Abusive. He said, in all his years being judge and being a lawyer, he's never ever seen that kind of ticket. So he didn't know what to do with it, because I asked him, what is the fee for this? What's going to happen? He had no clue. So, and I think everybody from that day knew somebody that was pulled over. My cousin and brother were pulled over. Cracked windshield. They checked everybody's IDs in the car. They looked at taillights. They did everything to, check their driver's license. Let them know. If you're going to pull them over for a cracked windshield, give them a ticket. If that is the reason you're pulling them over, but it wasn't. It was, it's again, under false pretext what he does. Everybody was being pulled over, not signaling while they were turning, honking horns, and I mean, here I was, fairly new on council. I guess a lot of people might have said naive to what he was going to be doing that night. And when I went to give him our own press release, we had a council meeting that night, so then afterwards they went to hand him a press release that he kept prepared. He wasn't talking to the media, the camera was off. But when I handed it to him, he got pretty crazy. He just erupted, which, I mean, he was so mad that even his spit flew on my face. And I think it was Faye Fredericks from Channel 12. She was there, she looked at her, photojournalist, and whoop, there went the camera, and it was captured. And made headline news that, small town mayor confronted the sheriff. What he told me too is like, you don't want us back? I said, no, we don't want you back. And he's like, too bad, I'm coming back tomorrow. But he didn't. So that was the best. No action, right? But what was really sad are the people who were directly arrested and their families. I think by some accounts, some may have been 4 undocumented people, we were never given the real accounts. For all we know, no documented or even arrested their mother for that night. But, I mean, I don't know if you guys remember seeing this on the news. It was just, I mean, I don't even know if you can imagine. If you can imagine 1 square mile and having hundreds of police officers, it just really felt like a lot of people compared it to like Nazi Germany, you know, in the time. This is the United States of America, you know, how can this be happening here? And then, like, here I am, you know, I was younger, just wet behind the ears, so to speak, still on council, and then I was bombarded by journalists. I've never had that in my life. From knocking on my laundry doors, to knocking on my windows and doors, getting hold of, you know, trying to interview my kids when I was not home. And just a few months later, just, you know, here I am leaving town hall about, I would say, 8:30 at night. I guess one of my headlights was off. Naive Rebecca again. I get pulled over probably about 1 minute from home by a deputy. Now, all my encounters with the deputies, I've been called fat pig. I've been called, one of them got so close behind him, I can feel him breathing on my neck, saying I'm following him all the way home. Just different things throughout the years that I've had with these. Come on, JIMENEZ, I'm following you still, so I'd walk as slow as I could, because you know, that's how I am. but he followed me close behind, and so I've had nothing but negative encounters with the deputies over the years, whether I was, you know, out there watching what they were doing with the neighbor, just to make sure they weren't violating civil rights. I've been on countless number of marches when I was in community college through the university. I was going marches even before I got on council. So when this deputy pulls me over for a headlight being out, he was really cordial, really nice. So I was like, okay, this guy is cool, right? Didn't think there was anything, I wasn't being targeted, I wasn't getting harassed. Until about 45 minutes to an hour later, I get home, my face is on every news channel. I got pulled over for a headlight. I'm making the news as the top story of the night. I'm like, are you kidding? There's missing children that don't get this kind of attention. There's, you know, forest fires that don't get the headline news. You know, the very first spot when you turn on that TV. And I'm like, why, one of the things that went through my head, why does the media give him that kind of clout? This is what feeds the monster. But, you know, I think it's a great day when you have a community group like Citizens for a Better Arizona, and all the kind of people that help them. That you never hear about when they do something big like recall Russell Pierce, who people thought he could not be touched. And let me tell you, I think Russell Pierce, not I said it before, he's one of the most evil people. He's evil. But he was taken down. And I really believe in 2012 the voters are smarter. They're informed, and they're not listening to all the fear mongering that Arpaio and his little group are putting out there anymore. I think they want somebody that is going to protect Maricopa County, whose main objective is not to get us into debt, but, you know, to save the children, you know, the countless sex crimes that are going uninvestigated. You know, I'm just like, I'm flabbergasted. A lot of people think, oh, he's still going to win. I don't think so. I think this man has had his day. I think he has bullied us for so long, and then when he sees groups like CBA and countless other groups who have stood up to him and who say no more, I think he takes a step back. He doesn't have that, you know, charisma anymore. If you notice, you don't see much of him on the news. Everybody's saying maybe it's the calm before the storm. I just think he's run out of breath. He can't. He's run out of audience too. I don't want to hear about him anymore. When he does come on, I'm sorry, I do change the channel. I just don't want to hear him anymore. I'm done with it. And I think a lot of people are. I think they're fed up. They want somebody to protect them. I mean, how hard is it really to go in and arrest a cook or someone driving off a car? If you're going to arrest and document people, go after the drug dealers. He doesn't go after those. He goes after the ones who are trying to stay under the radar, support their families and make money. So it's, yeah, it's easy to go into any workforce and do those rates, whether it's an air conditioning company, a candle making company, you know, what's Asian food restaurants, you know, even though it's a big chain, it's easy to go into those. But he acts like he's such a big man. And I just think he's nothing but a bully. And just like any bully, if you stand up to him enough and you say, no, enough is enough, he can eventually go back down. He won't have any more gusto. And I also want to say that all the marches I've been on, some of them with thousands of people against Arpaio, always peaceful. I've never been in there where somebody is throwing things, shouting nasty remarks. But what I will tell you that every Arpaio supporter I've ever encountered, maybe 10 at the end of the march, they're so hateful, so resentful, so violent. So that kind of tells you what kind of supporters he does have. You know, so, thank you. So it's not like I'm totally out. I just think that right now that I couldn't give 100% of me and what, you know, people would need from me. And that's why I haven't run for office in any capacity right now. I think as she gets a little older, maybe in another year, almost when she's 2.5, 3, that I think I'll be ready to, if there only
Thank you, Rebecca. Before we introduce our next panelists, I also want to recognize a couple of additional candidates who are in the room tonight. One is Lilia Alvarez. The other candidate is Andrew Sherwood. He is a candidate. Thank you for coming tonight. In Rochester, New York, moved to Arizona in 1969 and graduated from Xavier High School in 1971. Shortly thereafter, Susan began working in a family-owned business operating a chain of private employment services. In 1985, Susan began her career with Maricopa County as a detention officer at the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, Madison Street Jail. After 3.5 years, Susan joined the Flood Control Department as an administrative manager and later the Department of Transportation, working in the Minority Women-Owned Business Enterprise Division. In 1996, Susan was hired as the executive assistant to Maricopa County Supervisor Don Stapley, assisting the supervisor in serving constituents of district against the Board of Supervisors, sitting judges, county employees, and select Valley business owners. One of their first targets was Maricopa County Supervisor Don Stapley, who was hit with a 118-count indictment in December 2008. The indictment was followed by workplace raids and months of surveillance on Stapley, county administrative staff, and superior court judges by MCSO personnel. In February 2009, the Maricopa against her. In 2010, Susan sued Maricopa County, the Sheriff's Office, and the County Attorney's Office for abuse of civil rights and other abusive power violations. The claim was settled. And worked through some of the most turbulent, frightening, and disturbing times Maricopa County has ever seen. She shares with you her first-hand account.
Like Rebecca, I'm not afraid of the sheriff anymore. Bring him on. And I will be victorious again. As the moderator said, I did settle a case. This is the first time I've been able to speak about what happened to me. My case was settled last month for a 6-figure amount. I'm not able to give any more detail. The sheriff doesn't like anything else being. That should tell you what the nature and the nature of the type of behavior that was really thrust upon me. On July 27th of 2009, during a secretly recorded staff meeting that included Joe Arpaio and David Hendershot, Arpaio, talking about the battles with the county, childishly asked Hendershot whether or not he was having fun. Hendershot admitted that he was having fun. Arpaio also described during the same meeting how budget battles were largely responsible for what went down with the war between the Sheriff's Office and Maricopa County. The last part is key. Andrew Thomas and Arpaio waged war against Maricopa County, the courts, elected officials, and anyone else that dared question their spending or restrain their use or abuse of power. With disdain and contempt for any person disagreeing with them, They tried to counter the rule of law by tying the entire Maricopa County government in knots. They falsely accused people of crimes. They launched expensive, highly publicized, and dead-end investigations of dozens of people. They indicted some, they made arrests. They secured bogus search warrants and generally made a game of destroying people's lives. Nothing spells the game like Arpaio's own voice in the 2009 secretly recorded tape, when not knowingly, he recorded, that was recorded during the staff meeting, he jokes about the fun he's also having. An attempt to ward off an indictment and to ward off their wrath. In February of 2009, a few days after declaring me the focus of corruption, MCSO raided my workplace. Based on a search warrant affidavit that was almost identical to the one served on an East Valley developer in connection with the Don Stapley case. The only difference was that my name was copied and pasted into the search warrant. I had no idea who these companies were. I didn't know 9 out of 10 of the companies that I was supposedly connected with. The crimes I was supposedly accused of, financial crimes, bribery, fraud, you name it. The warrant was signed by a deputy with MCSO, attesting that there was probable, reasonable cause to connect me to these crimes. My office was searched, as well as a separate warrant for my personnel file and my time cards going back over a 3-year period. The press was alerted by the MCSO to the raid, and I was later informed by one of those deputies, who so kindly told me that David Hendershot ordered special shirts for this particular raid that were paid for with RICO funds. That they wanted the media to see something really nice, and they got it. They got a good show. And your RICO funds and a lot of other money went into this very highly publicized raid of Don Stapley's office. I was sitting there when it happened. I can tell you the shirts were great. I was told by the deputy they were never worn again. He also told me that David Hendershot was thrilled at the very thought of those shirts being on TV, and he thought it would be a nice touch. Unfortunately for the MCSO, the crimes that they were looking for never existed. Records related to the Stapley and the East Valley developer had been in their possession for months. Had there been any involvement of Susan Sherman in any financial documents, they certainly would have been seen when you take a look at the high-profile carrying out of computers, bank statements that were subpoenaed. It was not in any one of them. There was nothing to it. There was no connection with me, and in the end, of course, no charges were ever filed. However, I was never exonerated by the Sheriff's Office. I was left to twist in the wind and to assume that my case was closed. In 2010, I did sue the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office and a number of individuals involved in that bogus investigation. And while the settlement offers, it was settled last month, while that settlement offers some vindication of what I went through, it does little to address the problem that still exists, and that is Joe Arpaio. There are plenty of claims against the county, and to date the taxpayers have footed the bill to the tune of $1.8 million just to defend Arpaio, Thomas, Hendershot, and Aubuchon, and Maricopa County against these what they call Class A claims. The cost will no doubt climb considerably higher as a few of these cases move through to trial. This figure, of course, doesn't even take into consideration the settlement amounts. Arpaio doesn't care. After all, what's the problem if it isn't your money? Because Joe Arpaio and Andrew Thomas were so vocal in their corruption theories regarding Don Stapley and his failure to disclose certain properties I've made available to you as an audience member, a motion was filed by Don Stapley's attorneys for vindictive and selective prosecution. And what that motion does, starting on page 5, is give you, the audience, a first-hand look at 39 properties that Maricopa County Sheriff Joe Arpaio did not disclose himself. When he was asked about that by the media, he waved his hand, he said everything's been disclosed. That is not true. I've got the copies here if you'd like to see them. They're 39 by part and parcel. That's only a partial listing. There are many more. This abuse won't stop until Joe Arpaio is gone. There have been some positive changes. David Hendershot is gone, Andrew Thomas is gone, Lisa Aubuchon is gone. But what's happening, the blame game is still continuing. Arpaio is still blaming David Hendershot, and until Joe Arpaio leaves, there won't be any changes. So I thank you for taking your time to listen.
Because we've heard a lot in the paper, there's been a lot of anger towards people who've received settlements after suing the sheriff and the county attorney's office. How do you feel about that anger that's been directed towards you, but also how do you feel about how the media has been covering it, particularly when the anti-corruption cases were going forward? Did you feel like there was fair coverage as to what was really happening?
I've been called every name in the book, and I'm literally immune to it. That's okay. I've received death threats at the office. I've been told that I'm a worthless public pig. I should only get my attorney's fees. Since when should I only get my attorney's fees for my life being turned upside down? And I want to settle for attorney's fees and Michael Manning. There are people waiting in the wings, and it will not be pretty. The recent death of, unfortunately, Marty Atencio in the jail will prove to be yet another very costly lawsuit. They are abuse of power, they are deaths in the jail, and they are plain misconduct.
Thank you, Susan. We want to announce a couple more candidates that have come to our attention that are in the audience. I'm very excited to announce Daryl Luth. He's the constable for the Santan District. Is he here? Next, we'd like to introduce Tom Lovejoy. Sergeant Tom Lovejoy has worked as a police officer, graduated from Chandler High School and Mesa Community College. He currently attends Arizona State University. In his tenure with the Chandler Police Department, he has served as a patrolman, a field training officer, and in 1993 was selected as the department's first Reserve Explorer and Volunteer Coordinator when he began the Motorist and Victims Assistance Program. The program now has its own section in the department and is run by full-time civilians. Tom also facilitated the Explorer program, which grew to over 35 young men and women, many of whom are now police officers and dispatchers. This earned Tom a Meritorious Service Award for his hard work and dedication to community services. In 1996, Tom was promoted to detective, investigating property crimes and pawn shop regulations, and later a domestic violence detective specializing in threat assessment and stalking cases. In 2000, Tom was promoted again to sergeant, serving on patrol until being selected as the Neighborhood Services Sergeant, supervising 8 civilian, zoning inspectors, and graffiti abatement. 3 years later, Sergeant Lovejoy was selected as the department's first sergeant of the K-9 unit, working side by side with his faithful partner, Bandit. In August of 2007, the tragic accident took the life of Bandit, and as a result, Sheriff Arpaio publicly humiliated and criminalized Sergeant Lovejoy, despite lack of evidence or a shred of probable cause. Ultimately, Sergeant Lovejoy was acquitted and successfully sued Sheriff Arpaio for violating Lovejoy's civil rights. Tom is married to his wife Carolyn of 19 years, is the father of 2 daughters and 1 stepson. He currently resides in Gilbert, Arizona, and works as the administrative sergeant at the main station of the Chandler Police Department. Please welcome Tom Lovejoy.
For asking me to come speak today, and I really didn't prepare anything. I didn't know what I was going to say, but I'm really happy to know now that there's a whole room full of people that are on the same page as I have been since 2007. I think it's important that we all remember next week is Joe Arpaio's birthday, so if you So yes, I think that my gift to him is going to be one of our candidates for sheriff next year. I'm extremely humbled to be up here with this panel of guests because there's some very distinguished people that are here and that have been through a lot of things, as I have myself. In 2007, I had a lot of things that were going on in my life. I was working a lot of hours, I was working overtime, taking vacations for summer, and trying to be a dedicated family man. And, life got in my way. And in August of 2007, I was responsible for my dog Bandit dying. I left him in the vehicle. Never intentional, it was never something that even for a minute that I can understand what happened that day. But what I can tell you is that what happened was not criminal. And I don't know if we have the picture of it. You can see Bandit back here. He's a sweet dog, a sweet face. He goes on the media. They put his picture up there, and people automatically fell in love with him. You got the ugly police officer and the cute dog, so you can see where that's going to go in the media. A lot of people have asked, with that being the work dog and things like that, they don't understand that that dog is a part of your family. He's just as much as a kid or anything else. And if you look back to a lot of the things that were going on there, a lot of people were leaving their kids in the cars and they were dying, so at first, you're kind of thinking, well, how can that happen? But let me tell you that after you go through something like that, I can't tell you how it happened. All I can say is that you got to be careful and look out for yourself and make sure that that you're being, not letting life get your way and making sure that you got your priorities in order during that time. It's interesting because in 2007, when a lot of these things were going on with immigration and it was just starting to go and get and becoming a major issue, I think there was an issue where a reservist had held several immigrations at gunpoint, and things kind of started in the media as far as Arpaio and Andrew Thomas, taking odds at that, and it started swirling. Well, about that time, I had my incident, and at first nothing was going to happen out of it. We found out that the Sheriff's Department decided that he was going to investigate that. And what's interesting, I think that in my case, as time went on throughout the investigation and the charges that were ultimately filed about me, you had 3 players that were involved in my case that a lot of people don't realize. And it was the trio that we had back then, and it was Arpaio, Lisa Abishon, who is the prosecutor in my case, and then we also had Andrew Thomas. And I think I saw on Channel 12 today a little clip about Andrew Thomas, and he had a 2x4 in his hand. I don't know how many of you have seen that. And he wants to take care of corruption, and he's going to take care of it. He needs to beat himself in the head with a stick. The corruption that we're dealing with is that very corruption, and the people that are dealing with that are the people in this room, and it's people like Randy Perez right now that are going out there and doing the things. This is a very courageous thing that he's doing, and it's. Randy, I want to thank you for everything that you've done, because the things that you're doing right now, being in the spot that Susan and I and everybody up in the panel has been and targeted the sheriff. You're in a tricky spot, and my heart goes out to you, having been a target of some of the things the sheriff's done. And it's very courageous what you're doing, and I really thank you for everything and for allowing me to be here up on this panel. Hi, Mary Rose. Beginning of this time, I knew, being a police officer for 20 years, I knew there was no way there was any probable cause that I was going to be charged with this. So for that first month, I was just waiting for them to conclude that there wasn't going to be any charges. Even Andrew Thomas got in front of the media and said that accidents happen and they're not all a crime. And the next thing I know, I'm getting a call from Sergeant Summers from the MCSO saying he wants to speak with me about one more thing. And, you always make sure that your attorney is the one that the police officers are talking to. So I directed him to my attorney, and he said, no, we just have a few more questions for you. And I said, well, and I've been in law enforcement long enough that I know that what's going on here, and you're not going to do what you want to do. I was back to work, so it had taken them so long to figure this out. So I had gotten that phone call from him. I knew what was going on. I was actually back at work, working inside the office at a desk job. And I got a call from Sergeant Summers again. after I told him that he needed to speak to my attorney, and I hung up on him, and I told him, I said, look, you know, I'm not dumb. I've been a police officer for a long time. I know what you guys are doing, and that's not going to happen. A few minutes later, I got a call from Carol Lou, and many of you know her from, I believe it was Channel 10 at the time. Might have been 5, I don't remember. But anyway, she told me, Tom, what's going on? The sheriff has called a media conference, and we understand that you are the topic for this and that you're going to be arrested. I said, well, that's interesting because they're calling me and they want me to, they're wanting to meet with me so that they can obviously arrest me. So that was that point right there that I knew what was going on. This was a show. This is what we call a perp walk. And what he was going to do is basically take me into custody and get my picture in a booking photo and walk me through the court, which is not something we do in law enforcement. We don't treat people like that. It's disrespectful. We don't do that. In any of these cases where you have a situation like that, where you have somebody, a citizen that's been in the community, upstanding, I'm not going anywhere. I've never had any blemishes on my record at all through the entire time that I've been a police department, other than this one. And you know, so I wasn't going anywhere. We have what's called a citation. It's the same thing that Rebecca talked about. You know, there's a chip windshield kind of crime that we were looking at. And that's what needed to happen if that's what they decided to do. Anyways, I ended up meeting with the sheriff's department because I did not want them, you know, hunting me down or coming and ripping me away from my family, because they had obviously already set things up. And, you know, it was very malicious in the way that they had done those things. So ultimately what ended up happening, I went and told my assistant chief what was happening, and he drove me down to the substation where I was taken into custody and booked into the jail. Now, what's interesting about this is when I went into the jail, you know, I've been there many times. I've booked a lot of people into that very jail, so I'm very familiar with the systems. Clearly, the detective that had arrested me was not. That booking photo, I took that. The booking paperwork that had to be done, the detention officers there were not pleased with this whole thing. They turned their backs on the detective when he came in. And he asked, well, which computer do I use? And I told him, you use that one right there. And, you know, I could see this was going to be quite some time, and I wanted to get this over with. So I bellied up to the computer, I typed in my information. That's quite a crack operation that we have at MCSO. I'm fairly confident that the sheriff's office is probably a little bit beside themselves, because if they can't even investigate a simple crime as this, it's no wonder we have the problems that we do in El Mirage and everywhere else. So after this is done, I get done booking myself, if you will. We hop in this car. I'm going to tell you, Mary Rose, they need some money, because in use for their vehicles, because I was a little bit concerned about that vehicle, and I pointed out that thing was a piece of junk. But anyway, we made it. We made it one piece across the street. Went in to see the judge, and the judge, they made their case of whatever that was, and the judge said that I was going to be released on my own recognizance, which meant I was going to get released right then and right there. Well, they had booked me in. You can't get booked in, go see the judge, and then get out without an out booking process. So the judge, they said that also, and I hear the sergeant, my favorite person in the world, back there on the phone, you know, hollering at somebody saying it's, you know, you could hear him very upset that whoever he was talking to, saying that things weren't going to go quite the way they had planned. So the judge told him, I want you to understand, he told this to the detective and to the sergeant, he said, you know, you two need to understand something. I've released him. If you take him now and back in custody and walk him back over there, we're going to have a problem with unlawful imprisonment. Do you understand? The judge made it very clear that that was not going to be something that we were going to go through. Because I didn't want to, what they would do is if I had left, is they would have gotten an issue from the judge to have me unbooked, which would have meant they would have come, taken me again, taken me down to the jail, and had to unbook me. So anyways, I went back over to the sheriff's department, unbooked myself, and, you know, and out we went. So, you know, we spent the entire next year, you know, battling the sheriff and everything that was going on. And, I want you to understand that, what we talked about earlier, with Mr. Gascón explained to you, when you have a marriage with the Sheriff's Department and the county attorney, and the way that it is right there is the most dangerous thing that we can have in our society. People need to understand that, and here's where this is important. When they went through to charge me, the charging attorney that was actually working out of the Justice Court said, there's no probable cause. I cannot prosecute this guy. Mind you, this was one that he was a professional, and his area of expertise was animal crimes. And he's the one saying, there's no crime here, I cannot prosecute this. So he went to his bureau chief, who's basically third under Andrew Thomas, and told him there's nothing here. They started looking at it, and they actually sent it, Andrew Thomas had it sent to 3 different committees. It went to appellate level attorneys, and they all said, there's no probable cause here. There's nothing here, we cannot charge this. Andrew Thomas himself decided that they were going to charge it anyway. He ordered the bureau chief to go through and carry the case through the court. That bureau chief, and I have a lot of respect for that man, he told Andrew Thomas, I will quit if you make me do that. I will not sacrifice to prosecute this case. So that was done, okay. I guess Andrew Thomas was looking around the office and said, well, who can we get to file these charges? Well, there was Lisa Lovejoy sitting right across, so of course, she's going to do whatever he says, and there we went. And off to trial we went, and I think it took the judge all of about 30 seconds to decide that I had been acquitted, and then we were through with that whole chapter. Let me tell you, that year was extremely stressful for me. I'm a police officer, and here I've got misdemeanor charges hanging over my head. I'm looking at 6 months in jail for these charges had they gone through. And it was a very stressful time in my life. I got death threats, like Susan told you. That was viable. I had sheriff's deputies, all the cars back here. And another interesting note, I think that is curious to me, is that one of my officers ran the plate on one of these cars at one point, at one of their undercover cars, and they're registered to the Roundup crew or something like that. So I found that offensive. And it just tells you the arrogance of that sheriff's office and some of the things that are going on. And that needs to stop, and it needs to stop right now. And that starts right here, and it starts with everyone in this room. So, I just want to close with that, is that for all of you to understand that that's the trio that we have. We all got rid of 2 of the main players, as far as I'm concerned. Actually 3, because I'll count Russell Pierce. He needed to go. I get that. The next one is Joe Arpaio, and we can do that. And the message starts right here, starts with everybody in this room. So I personally want to thank everyone for supporting this organization, supporting this group, and supporting Randy's efforts. And I applaud all of you for doing that. Thank you for this time.
Make a special presentation, but before that, let's give one more final round of applause to our
there's been a lot of, since the success of the recall, people have said a lot of things, right? I've been in groups and it's almost embarrassing. Oh, yeah, anybody single-handedly recall Russell Pierce, right? So it's just this myth, because you all know better, right? We all know better. Thank you for the comments about courage, but these people in this room have courage beyond what you think. These folks, stand up if you're a part of the recall. Stand up if you're legit. Stand up if you've got a position. Stand up. Let's see. Let everything happen. work with the recall, right? Someone else is trying to get back into this. So we're going to count on you to do that. We have unfinished work of Sheriff Arpaio, right? All these examples we had today know that we still need your courage, right? To turn Arizona in a better direction. So can we count on you for that courage? And this is John Holbert. I don't know, some of you know John is involved in politics, he's a lawyer, a businessman. We had a sit-down conversation a couple weeks ago. And during that conversation, he said he wanted to help us. He appreciated the work we did. Although, he watched the recall from before, he wasn't really intricately involved. He said, look, what you all did with that group was amazing, was historical. You helped me know you fought against the divisiveness, the fear, the retaliation, extremism. And so for that, I want to support your effort. So we started talking about that. And so today, 2 weeks later, I'm proud to announce that John has decided to donate $40,000.
Realize that Randy is very persuasive. November is going to be an amazing, probably turning point in the country. It clearly is here in Arizona. I want to wake up the morning after the election, I already dream it, and I see a headline, top poll, new sheriff in town.
So I was talking to guys who know it's funny, but I know you need a lot more than that. So I want my $40,000 to be matched by $40,000. I said, fair enough, because every time I challenge a group, they respond. So this is how it's going to work. We had 3 people, surprised. You put the next slide up there? We're almost there. It's a 14-day match, once until the next 14 days. Chad Snow, Parkfield, the law firm, we've already committed 7,000, right? So I was down now. With the help of Tony Bracamonte and others, we had another anonymous donor at $1,000. And another anonymous donor at $1,000. Just yesterday, someone from Cruz & Associates, based on this check for $40,000, pledged another $500. And then Barbara Valencia, who I saw at another event this weekend, said, oh, I want to give my $100. So there's different ranges, right? So we got today, we're saying, look, we have a pledge card. Who has a $1,000 pledge card? Listen to that. Reg here. If you can pledge $1,000, that means you can write a check for $1,000, or help us raise $1,000 from your friends over the next 14 days, stand up and we'll get you that $1,000 pledge card. Right there. If you can do it, all right, you can say that's $1,000. Even now at $1,000. If you can't do it, that's okay. It's like you the opportunity, right? 1,000 your family and friends to make that happen. Anybody else? 1,000? 1,000? All right, you all wait for 500, right? You all wait for 500. All right, so I know, but we're trying to make it fix. So again, at the 500, who can either write a check for 500 or find people to give $500 over the next 2 weeks? On the back over there, all right, what's the gentleman's name? Chandler, everywhere else? All right, there goes Bill Cox, right here. Let's hear for our supervisor, there goes Bill Cox. Anybody else that can help with $500 up in the top corner, right? Go get $500 pledges. Dan on the other bar. Come up with $500. Kenny A, right now, right on. Any other $500 donors? $500? All right, so of course we said the most for $100. Who can either help us with $100 or help us raise $100 in the next 14 days? $100, raise your hand. Who's got the $100 pledge card? Here it is. Dan, Martinez. Saul, over here. Over here, the rest of the wall. Jim Sheep. Against the wall. Anyone else at the $100 level? We got to do this on 14 days, right? This work, our challenge as an organization, you should understand, is because last year when other organizations were preparing for this election, what were we doing? Recall. Our organization was trying to put in the money for those $500,000 brands, all those things. What were we doing? A recall, right? When other folks are doing this, so we're late in the game. But the drive and commitment and passion all of you have demonstrated has been unparalleled, creating historical change, not only here, but in the history of the United States. So that's why we put this challenge on you tonight. So I want to thank you all who agreed to pledge. So now things are also in motion because a couple of days ago we're at the Board of Supervisors asking the board to really focus on our protection on real investigations. So the next thing is we're asking people to show up on June 20th. Got the flyers, Molly? So if you can be there on June 20th, 8:30 in the morning, raise your hand. We need you to turn out to be there to show, to demonstrate the fact we're tired of our tax dollars being wasted. This is our opportunity to use the press and the media to put pressure on Arpaio and to get the Board of Supervisors to finally do the right thing. Right, so other folks are passing those flyers out. And so in terms of next steps, we reopened our old recall office in Mesa. We're making phone calls because we call them unfinished work with the recall. We need to educate voters now about Russell Pierce trying to run again. Make sure that doesn't happen. On June 23rd, we have a big kickoff out in Mesa again to educate and talk to voters, raise some people for that. So our work is not done. And you all know this work doesn't get done by one person. We have a tremendous volunteer staff with Molly Duran's here and I helped lead this effort tonight. Where's Molly? Right there, Molly Duran, Molly. Dawn Uncoordinated in the back. We got Dawn Uncoordinated, Liz Carrillo on interns. Where's Sarah Ryan? Look on the top, Sarah Ryan being our office going. Sarah. I mean, just scores of volunteers, Amanda Zill and Dan O'Neill, I go on and on. These are the people that make it happen. I think one of the most grassroots volunteer organizations that are out there right now. So what do you want to commend the work? Right, from Saul Luis and Dan Martinez from East Valley Papers. Folks who are coming to the table to make this stuff happen. So we thank you for all that, for all the work that you're doing.
We just wanted to announce too, this is, as I said at the beginning, this is just the second in a series of these educational forums that we're going to be holding. We're working on the next forum for September. We want to have it right before the election, right before people start turning in early ballots for the election, to kind of get the maximum amount of bang for it. We're working on getting one of the judges who was a victim of Joe Arpaio's abuse. We're working on getting a couple of the politicians, one of whom is here with us, Mary Rose Wilcox. Mary Rose will maybe talking to you later. And so a judge, a politician, one of the journalists who was yanked out of his home, thrown in jail. Again, I think like George Gascón said, you can't believe these things happened in the United States in 2008. And so we're working on a very interesting broad range of victims of Joe Arpaio. We're going to shift to that and really let the public know about the people who have been victimized by his abuse of power and the cost to us as taxpayers of that. So be looking for more news. That'll probably be sometime after the end of summer in September. We'll be working on that.
Dave Hendershot suing the sheriff. Maybe he'll want to appear.
So again, everyone, we're just going to, I want to recognize one of the persons, but during the week we got the closers. People come in the last 6 weeks really help. You've been out there for almost 6, 7, 8 months. One of them is here today, the National Director of Mi Familia Vota, Ben Monteroso. Please stand up. He'll bring in resources and effort to help us make that happen. I want to thank him for all that work. One of our partners, he helped us happen. Y'all may not see him on foot. He moves a lot of things to help our efforts. I want to thank him for that particular work. I think also those are other guests up here, Mr. Gascón. They go back in their days in California, Ben Monteroso and you. So again, just in closing, I just want to thank you again for all the work you put into. But I have to tell you, it's not enough. You know, we need more people. It's not enough. We need more money. It's not enough. I wish we could just do it with just many people. We're not a county fight. So part of my job is to put the work on all of you to say, how many more people do you know? How many more relatives do you know? We can tell this story. How many more families do you want to fight? How many more children have to suffer from separation? Because this person chooses to use these families for political purposes. That's our challenge now. I had a long day. I've been traveling a week. I am fired up because of those stories. I've met with businessmen who have been raided. I met with families whose husband or father was in jail for 6 months, right? And finally, because they were smart enough not to sign everything when they went to jail, they got out and found not guilty by a jury of their peers. Yet they didn't see their kids. 2 of them were American citizens, not see their father for 7 months. Because the mother said, I was told that if they go to jail, they can't touch them. I was telling them up and see their father in that particular situation. And brothers and sisters, this is happening under our watch. Some of you go back a generation, you used to fight this fight. These fights are not all over. So I look in this room, I see promise, I see hope, I see opportunity. So if you will stay with us and fight with us, we will together make change and last and help these families. So can I count on your support?
one way or another. The biggest thing is, of course, the money. 40,000. That's a nice chunk. Very generous. You're doing a great job. People watch the video if they're looking up to their face. You know? I'm just saying it's stop shot. Because people will look for themselves. Oh yeah. You show a picture with a bunch of people in it, and the person looks Okay. I'll be there about 15. Huh? I'll be there about 15. All right. How my daughter's I have a special interest in this whole subject.
Just give me one of them. I guess it's probably different, but you know what? I will write it down first. The name is looks like a is that a zero or a